Do some sports stars just need to create needle to really fire them up? I mean, Djokovic has done everything.
The ref in snooker looks like a butler. He could be bringing you your cue on a silver platter.
What keeps Ange Postecoglou in a job from here?
Trophy.
Because it ain't the Premier League table.
Yeah, if he wins the League Cup or gets them to a League Cup final, I think that's probably enough, to be honest.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 30 with myself, David, Mr. Oliver Wilson. Ollie, plenty to get through this week. We've got Premier League title race. We've got Ruben Amorim calling Man United the worst Man United team in history. We got Novak Djokovic falling out with everyone at the Australian Open. We got NFL, golf, and lots of other stuff I've missed off in between. But how are you, mate?
All good, man. Sport is sensational. It just is. Yeah, like, I've slept for maybe 4 hours last night because of sport, and I couldn't be happier this morning still. It's great.
And if it got taken away from you, Ollie, what would you do? If you couldn't watch another minute of sport the rest of your life?
Let's not say
There'd be
things.
some soul-searching, right?
Let's not say things like this. I don't know what... I genuinely... Because would that include not being able to play sport as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be...
Let's say you couldn't watch or play a minute of sport the rest of your life. What would you do?
Oh, God, I'd have to get really good at, like, cooking or something. I think that'd be the way forward of learning a craft like cooking that you can be a bit creative with and stuff. Mm-hmm. But nobody needs more cooking Instagram and TikTok videos, do they? So it'd be purely for my own self-indulgent, and then I just get really fat.
Wilson cooking up a storm in the kitchen with some kind of sports theme in the background.
No sport, mate.
People
Can't have sport.
People have made huge like TikTok accounts from like Footy Scran and stuff like that, right? Like comparing the different meals at grounds around the world, and you go to like Hungary and get whatever for like £1.40, and then Tottenham Hotspur Stadium's like £18 for a cheeseburger or something. So anyway, we digress, Mr. Wilson. Let's jump in with the good stuff. A very smiley Mr. Wilson. Just let us in on the secret then, Ollie. What happened in the world of American sport last night that's making you smile? Before we jump into the real stuff.
We had two playoff games last night, both bathed in snow, which made it absolute hectic carnage in Philadelphia and Buffalo. The Eagles grinding out a very close victory over the LA Rams, and the Buffalo Bills getting one over the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So both will be going to the championship games of their respective conference, and both are one win away from the Super Bowl. But in terms of action and drama, it was absolutely incredible. I was actually laughing to myself because I was just thinking, I was wondering what my dad would do without sport, because he rang me up this weekend just to say that he'd confirmed his ticket to the Milan Derby coming up in a few weeks' time, because he's come over some health stuff and everything, and he sent me a message saying, do you fancy going if we can get tickets? I was like, I've got work, but you should 100% go on your own. Going to football and going to sport on your own is definitely a thing that should be like not even a second guess, second thought. And he sent me a message this week saying, yeah, I managed to get one online. I've booked my ticket for the Milan Derby. I was like, that's amazing.
Wilson Senior, little weekend in Milan solo, on the beers, at the footy. Beautiful. Back to full health. What a world.
He's ballsed it up, though, because it's about 180 quid, I think, or something like that for a ticket for the Milan Derby.
I don't think that's that bad. Bearing in mind, like, you're not a season ticket holder, so you're not part of any loyalty scheme. You're buying outside the regular market.
But 4 days later, it's the Coppa Italia, but Roma against Milan. That's €25, 25 quid, something like that. And it's like, it just shows that the price gouging, even in Italy, which is relatively cheap, is still in existence. But that's mad as well. Coppa Italia, quarter-final, Milan-Roma for like 25, 30 quid. That is bonkers.
Times are tight and there's a lot of football. I think you might see that more and more in the Cups with big teams sort of struggling to fill the stadiums. All right, let's talk Premier League, Ollie. A very, very demoralising weekend for Mikel Arteta and Arsenal. And I think that every weekend in the title race always feels big and all points are worth the same. But at the same time, if you're Arsenal, an Arsenal fan, an Arsenal player, and you're watching Liverpool against Brentford, and you watch Liverpool batter Brentford in that second half, just as they did against Nottingham Forest, and not score, and then big Darwin Núñez pops up with a brace in injury time to give Liverpool the win, to kind of get them out of a mini slump, and then you go into your game against Aston Villa, you're 2 goals up, and then you drop 2 points. I mean, it feels like the last 2 months, that 6-7 point gap with the game in hand has kind of just been omnipresent, and it's there, and Arsenal aren't chipping away at it. And there's still a big chunk of the season to go, but there is less than half the season to go now, and Arsenal put themselves in a position where that margin for error has just been completely filled out. Like, it's been scratched in, scribbled in, it's done. So they can still win the league, but what Arsenal need to do now is go on. I think they've got 16 games left. They need to go on a run of pretty much near perfection where they win 14 or 15 of those 16 games. And that's a tough ask. But a bad week for Mikel Arteta. I said it last week on Not Another Sports Pod. I do almost feel for him because I think what he's done the last 5 years is clear progress. And I think he's kind of unlucky in some ways because he's prioritised the Premier League at a time when City were nigh on invincible. And he didn't kind of pick up a few trophies along the way, and now it's built up to this point where, well, you didn't win the Premier League, and you didn't collect loads of cups, so what's actually happened the last 5 years? So I think he's a bit unlucky in that sense. Look, the title race isn't over, Ollie, but that felt like a big Premier League weekend to me in the title race.
Yeah, especially the manner of being 2-0 up and blowing it against Villa. I sent you a WhatsApp message this weekend when we were discussing what we're going to talk about. We do have some sort of semblance of a plan for NASP, but it was very much a Liverpool's victory is a title winner's win, and Arsenal's blowing it is what sides do that are going to finish second. And you look at Arsenal's run coming up as well, just in the Premier League. Let's take the Champions League out of the equation, but Wolves, okay, not the easiest game, not the hardest game in the world, on the road, still not great. But then you go Man City, Leicester, West Ham, Forest, Arsenal, Chelsea, Forest United, Chelsea. That's not a great run for going into mid-March. And if anything is going to happen, you get the feeling,
your best player.
You get the feeling that maximum points are pretty much going to be needed from the majority of those games. But then you have to throw in 2 Champions League games and the second leg, of course, of what's been a rather demoralising Carabao Cup semi-final so far against Newcastle. It's a really rough road if you're an Arsenal fan to look at and say, how do we come out the other side of mid-March feeling like we're still in this title race? Because I just don't see it happening at this point.
Let's talk about big Darwin Núñez, Ollie. Not many more fascinating footballers in the Premier League than Darwin Núñez. It cost 64 million quid initially, I think rising to 85 if he hits all his targets, which he won't. I mean, under Jurgen Klopp, this kind of big, mad Uruguayan with huge hair, cult figure, comes on, Captain Chaos, kind of worked under that Jurgen Klopp side as like the Joker in the pack. Under Arne Slot, it doesn't really work because Arne Slot's a bit more controlled, and I think he wants A, B, and C out of his footballers, not whatever you're going to get with Darwin Núñez. There's not many footballers like him. Comes on, scores a couple of goals. If he leaves in the sun, which I imagine he will, because he just doesn't fit what Arne Slot wants to do. I think, and Liverpool do go on to win the title. I think he'll always have that, as he came off the bench in such a big game to produce such a big moment. There's also a moment which I'm not sure they showed on the highlights, but he's just scored 2 goals. He's come off the bench. He's on a yellow card because he took his shirt off for the goal celebration. Which, by the way, Ollie, the only reason to do that is to reveal your torso. Taking your shirt off to reveal like a skin tight undershirt, it doesn't work. The only reason to do that is to kind of bear all in a moment of passion. So it doesn't. The taking a shirt off with an undershirt underneath is just farcical for me.
Well, what about the praise God messages underneath as well? There's the undershirt.
Like the caca, Jesus loves me.
Yeah.
I love Jesus.
It's to get your religious message out, your political message out as well. I mean, if you've got nothing written on the undershirt.
It's not allowed now, is it? I think that's kind of the reason. Is that the reason it came in? Because players were promoting stuff and, religious messages and political messages and things like that. I think that's half the reason it came in.
There was something about that, and I think it was also... I'm sure somebody, and they might have been winding me up, and I need to tread carefully, obviously, but it was something to do with like offending people in terms of revealing too much of your own body in public on like a global scale or something like that, which again, I don't know. Yeah, I mean...
Anyway, he got a yellow card for that, and then straight afterwards, he scored his 2 goals. He just has no capacity to suppress his emotion. He jumps in a challenge that was almost a straight red. It was definitely a second yellow. Somehow he gets away with it, and he doesn't get sent off. But yeah, big Darwin Núñez is a real kind of Premier League character, and he's the kind of player that, if you went to a West Ham or mid-table side, you could see him scoring a lot of goals, but he's obviously an arm around the shoulder kind of footballer because he doesn't suit coming on here and there and being played in a dead rubber in the Champions League or the third round of the FA Cup. He doesn't suit that. He obviously needs a coach to put the arm around the shoulder and be like, you are our number 9. All right, you might miss 3, but you'll score 1 here and for that reason. But yeah, it's a big weekend in the Premier League title race. Let's just talk about Nottingham Forest, because we barely give them any airtime on Not Another Sports Pod, so maybe we should now, Ollie. I mean, they're 6 points off Liverpool, same as Arsenal. An absolutely astonishing season from Nuno Espirito Santo. And I thought the game against Liverpool really showed how that side operates. Yeah, Liverpool had loads of chances midweek in the second half, but that physicality, you don't see much in the Premier League anymore. That real physicality is so impressive, and it's harnessed in a way that it doesn't go overboard. It's just about within the lines, and you can still, even in 2025, even in modern day football, you can still bully teams, I think, physically, and they obviously have done that. I mean, that's not taken away from the quality, and Chris Wood's had a great season. There's obviously great technical players in that 11 and in that squad, but yeah, a great addition, this Nottingham Forest side to the Premier League this season.
Yeah, but it's a very much similar characteristic that when Wolves are at their best under Nuno Espirito Santo, and I think we mentioned it very early on in the season when Forest kind of came out of the blocks kind of flying, really. It's not just the physicality, it is just a very well-structured, organised process. You cannot underestimate how everybody knowing their job, and this is very like American, do your job, know your assignment kind of thing, but doing what you need to do and understanding what you need to do and how you fit into the larger piece. It's great when you've got skill players that can go outside of those channels to create something extra special that puts you over the top. But everybody else, just understanding what their role is for 90 minutes, 95 minutes on a football field. And Nuno Espirito Santo does bring that level of organisation to most places that he goes. So, look, it's surprising what Forest have done, but the manner in which they're doing it is very much kind of via the modus operandi that Nuno Espirito Santo has always operated under.
Let's talk about other sides in the Premier League, Ollie. Two things caught my eye this weekend. One was Ruben Amorim saying this is the worst maybe the worst Manchester United side in history. I mean, it's obviously not, because the history of Manchester United is over 100 years old. Why say that? You know, why say that? He knows it's a headline. It's a bit like, well, you are the manager then of maybe the worst Manchester United side in history. It's just kind of an odd time to say it as well. Obviously, it's a bad result against Brighton. I get it. But prior to that, you know, you get a draw at Anfield. You knock Arsenal out the FA Cup. Beat Southampton, didn't they? So it was like a good little run. So why say it now? I mean, it's obviously not the worst Manchester United side in history. It's a very bad Manchester United side in the context of the last 3 or 4 decades. But, you know, sitting in a press conference and saying this is the worst Manchester United side in history. I mean, what's he trying to say there? Is he trying to say, I hate all the players I've inherited here, and don't worry, I'm going to refresh the whole thing in the summer?
I think it's partly that. It's one of those messages to the larger Manchester United board and body saying, look, change has to happen. This is going to be a long process. This is probably being outlined behind the scenes of what I need to get this team out of this funk and who I need. I think it's also just a message to supporters that, you know, United fans aren't happy about with this side. I was chatting with a United fan on Sunday who was saying, you know, I want a clear house. I want to see all of the rubbish just removed, players that don't work, don't run, don't bring any energy. And I think it's probably just a message to supporters as well to say, look, I understand where you're coming from. And at this point, you know, January is always a slightly difficult window to do all the business that you want. It's a bit more thought out and planned, I think, going into a summer most of the time for managers. And I think this is probably just a sign of him saying, look, I understand where you're coming from, where your frustrations come from, and this club does need an overhaul, but I want to be the guy to bring that overhaul. It's a weird point to make because, as I say, I think most people looking at United understand that it is full of negativity right now, as we've harped on about on this. But also, I think it's important that he's not being shy about it. Because if Amorim came out and said, no, I love my squad, this is all great, this is the steps that we want to see, we'd say, are you mental, Ruben? Have you gone full Ange Postecoglou and just denying any fallibility? I actually feel sorry for Ange this week, and we'll get onto that in a second because he's been thrown under the bus massively. But yeah, I think Amorim is just being probably fairly actually level-headed by saying this, just saying, look, I understand where this club is. This is in a rubbish place right now. It's absolutely rubbish, but we are at least trying to turn things around.
Ange Postecoglou in Tottenham. Ollie, based on league form alone, I don't think he should be in a job. And I say that because if you look at the Premier League table on the 20th of January 2025, Tottenham Hotspur are 15th in the Premier League table, mate. They've won 7 games all season. You know, they're in terrible form. They're not in a relegation battle because the sides below just simply aren't picking up enough points to drag the likes of Tottenham, West Ham, Man United into it. I mean, it's as far as I can see, I think Everton will be okay now with David Moyes as well. It's 3 from 4 at the bottom there. But for Tottenham Hotspur, Ollie, the reason that Ange Postecoglou is still in a job, and we talk about the fact that he's been unlucky with injuries, we can talk about that, but the reason he's still in a job is because he's still in 3 cup competitions, right? And if you look at the fixtures he's got next, in the next 6 games, he's got 4 cup matches. They're away at Hoffenheim in the Europa League, then they're home against Leicester in the Premier League, then they're home against Elfsborg in the Europa League, then they're away at Brentford in the Premier League, then 2 really big ones, because the Europa League, they will, I think, at least finish in the playoff positions, right? Then they travel to Anfield, protecting that 1-goal lead in the Carabao Cup semi-final. Now, if they can go to Anfield and somehow grind it out and stop Liverpool, maybe Arne Slot rests a few, and he could take his side to the Carabao Cup final, that 100% keeps him in a job. And equally, I think if they can go to Villa in the 4th round of the FA Cup and win, even if they lost the Carabao Cup, I think then it'd still be in the Europa League, still be in the FA Cup. I think it'd stay in a job. But on league form alone, I mean, he's gone 6 weeks ago. You know, he's gone. So it's the cups that are keeping him in a job. I'm very intrigued now, Ollie, to hear you say you feel a bit sorry for Ange, or you explain what you're thinking is there.
There was a post-match interview on TV that was, the interview started with the line, "Familiar story then, Ange," which I thought was horrible as a way to open an interview with somebody. I think that's a really ugly and dismissive way, because you're not asking a simple your thoughts on the 90 minutes or something like that. You're literally saying, same old story, eh, Ange? You're bloody rubbish, aren't you? And then people got annoyed that Ange Postecoglou got very prickly about that. He's not stupid, despite what people think about his inability to change tactics and bolster down this Tottenham defence in any way from a managerial role. But he isn't stupid, and he understands that he's in a pressure situation right now because this league form is so dire. So to get annoyed at Ange Postecoglou being frustrated with a completely loaded start to an interview, it's heaping unnecessary crap on his shoulders more than anything else, when actually just saying, Ange, another frustrating defeat this weekend, how does this compare to other defeats, or something like that. But to kind of be almost, it's like you're taking the mick out of him. Familiar story, eh, Ange? Like, if you, Dave, were having a terrible time, right? I don't know, say something happens in your world, it's a woman that you're in love with or something like that, and then she walks away from you. And if I just went, so, Dave, thoughts on pretty usual thing for Windsor after these sorts of relationships, eh? It's just
it's a bit mean, isn't it? I guess the difference is that person asking the questions, Ollie, they are being paid to elicit a certain response to get a certain amount of views and a certain amount of clicks, and you'll get that by extracting the highest level of emotion from Ange.
That's not your job as an interviewer. Your job as an interviewer.
I mean, it kind of is.
Well, you're meant to be the mediator between the fans and the manager, driving clicks. The idea of doing an interview to drive clicks, i.e., inciting a riled up reaction. Mate. Yeah, but it's just pathetic, because that's not what it should be. It should be.
But that's what it is. I mean, why do you think Roy Keane called Erling Haaland a League 2 player, or he says Trent's like a rubbish defender? They don't actually believe these things because they've got contracts.
He's not doing it to his face. Is he? He's not going up to Trent Alexander-Arnold and going,
it's not how I would start an interview. And I think on paper, obviously I don't know who the broadcaster was, but on paper, I mean, they're supposed to be a mediator, but in reality, there's a producer there saying, "Oh, Ange is in a weak moment. Let's see what we can get out of him. Why don't you lead with this?" Or, I don't know, Ollie. These people have got contracts, and they don't have contracts to be nice. They have contracts to ask very awkward questions. I agree with you. The framing of it's quite.
It's not a question.
Messy and a bit mean.
That's the thing. It's not a question. It's just a statement. Familiar thing.
But isn't that how Aussies work?
if it goes up at the end of the sentence, then you know
where they go up. Yeah. Ollie, does he survive then? I reeled off those 6 games, 4 cup games in the next 6. I mean, what Let me rephrase that. What keeps Ange Postecoglou in a job from here?
Trophy.
Because it ain't the Premier League table.
Yeah, if he wins the League Cup or gets them to a League Cup final, I think that's probably enough, to be honest. Because
if he gets knocked out the Carabao Cup in the second leg against Liverpool, but stays in the Europa League and the FA Cup, he can keep his job.
I don't think the FA Cup really saves him at this point. We're only at the 4th round stage, so hanging your hat on, I can grind this out. Same with the Europa League. There is an immediate positive thing that can happen before we get to that kind of end of the season madness of late February, March time, where there's those last ditch moves managerially from some sides that then start looking to plan for a summer. And I think that's the time that Ange Postecoglou needs to be worried about. So he needs an upturn in form in the league, or a dramatic upturn in form in the league, or he needs to go and lift a Carabao Cup, and I think that will save him. It would certainly help him save a lot of face. But if he goes out of the FA Cup, if he doesn't make a Carabao Cup final, and the league form kind of continues, I think you do start thinking that Daniel Levy will turn and try and see somebody else through the door before the end of the season, which is a shame, because
it's a massive shame.
Like,
he's great. He's fucking great.
Tottenham are awesome to watch. Like, as entertainers, I mean, you're talking about, the media are there to ask these loaded questions and elicit these reactions and everything. Well, isn't sport there to entertain us now more than anything else?
Oh, are you not entertained, as the big man, as Big Ange once famously said?
Yeah, and I 100% am entertained every time I watch Tottenham, but I'm not a Tottenham fan. So that's probably why it's easy to be entertained by it. If you're a Tottenham fan, it's a nightmare scenario having to go through 90 minutes once or twice a week.
It's also a bit patronising if you're a Tottenham fan and hearing that you're everyone's favourite second team, and there's this sort of layer of comedy around it. Like, wouldn't it be funny if Big Ange actually won something, guys? Like, there's an element of comedy around it. Like, everyone enjoys watching Tottenham because it's just a side with seemingly no rules.
They're like a fun failure at this point in the Premier League, which is what everyone likes.
I wonder where Ange at sort of 60 goes from here. One of the reasons I like him in the Premier League as well is because he's just the oldest manager in there at 60. I think it's great. Is he going to win the Carabao Cup? I think it's a big ask at Anfield. I think he'd need a bit of luck, and I think he'd need a team selection from Liverpool to go his way. And I agree with you, actually, that even if he goes through to the last 16 or 32 of the Europa League and the last 16 of the FA Cup, to keep him just because you might win the trophy in one of those feels like a stretch, because there's a long way to go and some big games, and you would have only beaten Tamworth and then Villa away in the FA Cup. But yeah, that away at Anfield and away at Villa and 2 cup competitions, if those results don't go his way, I think he's in trouble.
Which was the most impressive performance of the weekend in the Premier League for you, Dave? Manchester City or Bournemouth?
Oh, great question. I think the Manchester City revival, Ollie, is almost a little bit under the radar because the title's gone now. And I think, look, Ipswich are not a fantastic side, and plenty of sides have and will spank them the rest of the season. But I do think this kind of mini Manchester City revival, when you bear in mind that they're still in the FA Cup and still in the Champions League, I mean, it's not impossible to me that they do something special in the Champions League, for example. It's still the same group of footballers. It's still I know they're older and Rodri's not there and blah, 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 but it's still the same group of footballers as last season. So it's not impossible to me that something happens in the Champions League, and, even if they won the FA Cup and finished second or third, I mean, that's a trophy in top 4 for every side in the league is a good season. So yeah, I'm going to say City. You?
I think Bournemouth were just spectacular against Newcastle on the road as well. I mean, yeah, just quality. And, we always blabber on and everybody goes on about, this is a sign of how good the Premier League is. But it is one of those results that if this had happened in Italy last season, like with Bologna, for instance, I'd have been saying, why are people not watching this? And I think that result is one of those ones where I go, yeah, everyone can get distracted by Liverpool's comeback. That was fantastic against Brentford. You can look at City thumping 6 past Ipswich, which was actually quite funny that Peter Drury described it as, as the teams walked out, a fantasy fixture for Ipswich fans a few years ago. And I was like, no, this is a living nightmare for them now at this point. Like, there's no fun in watching your team get battered 6-0 at home. But the Bournemouth result...
Isak Price watch, by the way? Chipped another 10 million off him there for a quiet game. Finally stopped scoring.
The guy's a flash in the pan, isn't it? Can't even beat Jamie Vardy's record, and who's he these days? So,
Ollie, just quickly, just while it popped into my head about City. Erling Haaland signed a 9.5-year contract. Why? Unusual.
Yeah.
Why has he done that? What's it?
Why? Why is a good word for that. Why?
I mean, obviously the money, but why would you sign that? Why would you sign a 9.5-year contract? Why would you tie yourself into one football club? Is he so in love with Manchester City Football Club that he wants to be there for the next 9.5 years?
It just doesn't mean anything. Contracts don't really mean anything anyway. You could have a contract as long as your arm, but if Haaland wants to go in 2 years, he'll go in 2 years. It's just a way for City to guarantee that if their fall from grace continues and Erling Haaland decides he does want to go elsewhere and play with a side that has realistic title ambitions every single year, it's going to cost somebody a lot of money to do it. And it's just a great backing for the club. And Haaland knows that, look, if the bigger the fee that gets paid for him leaving Manchester City, the bigger the signing on bonus he'll probably get as well from whichever club comes to him. So it doesn't really matter for a forward at this point, I would have thought. Contracts, as I say,
there are just so many clauses these days. Like, if Real Madrid come in, actually my value is 50 million. If we go down, then I can leave for free. Or if the legal case, blah, 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 blah. You know, is it just littered with 100 different clauses that actually are little escape routes for Haaland if he wants them?
Well, I know the back end of that contract, obviously. I helped him put it together, so I know all of the... No, I mean...
Well, I know, Mr. Wilson, you got, You got
fingers and pies all over the place. Yeah. No, I mean, it very much could be that there could be a number of clauses in it. I just think it's one of those ones that safeguards the club, and kind of there'll be assurances for the player as well. And worst comes to worst, it's a 9.5-year contract that is now guaranteed money. If anything happens to Erling Haaland, he's going to get paid out for almost 10 years. So if he takes a knee injury and his career's over, I mean, that's unbelievably good. Yeah.
Although City must have put in a clause to safeguard them there. But yeah, very interesting nonetheless. Just sort of popped off the BBC Sport page when you see it because it's so unusual. Just before we move on to other sport, two things caught my eye this week outside the world of European football, or outside the world of Premier League at least, Ollie. It's two managerial appointments, and it made me think how odd football is as a business and as a concept, because you can hire someone to lead your organisation, your business, your football club with absolutely zero connection to that company. As in, Patrick Kluivert became the head coach of Indonesia, right? And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer became the Besiktas boss. And I just think it might work for both of those two men. You know, good luck to them. I hope it does. But what connection does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have to he doesn't speak Turkish, has no connection to Besiktas or the city or anything to do with Besiktas Football Club. He's literally just a name because he played for Manchester United and managed Manchester United as well. And then Patrick Kluivert to Indonesia. I mean, does he have some deep connection to the country that I don't know about? Possibly. I haven't really delved into it. But I'm just using those two. I'm picking on those two. But it's a wider point of like Wayne Rooney goes to Plymouth. It's like you don't have any connection with the region or the football club, or at least he speaks the language. But there's so many managerial appointments that happen. You think, okay, like what? Like you walk in the first day, it's like, oh yeah, so I don't speak the language, but somehow I'm going to motivate these players and deliver intricate tactical tweaks, etc., etc. It's just an odd business, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion around both of these kind of appointments, particularly the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer one, led me to hunt out an article I'd actually seen crop up a few weeks back of managers that you had no idea, like ex-players were managing these rogue clubs. So if you want some weird ones, forget Ole Gunnar Solskjaer taking a job in Turkey. Know where Lee Bowyer's managing these days, David Windsor?
Lee Bowyer. Famous for having a fight with... That was proper Barclays, that, isn't it? A fight with Kieran Dyer on the pitch. Lee Bowyer. Oh, my God.
And this actually came up in my in my Vanarama National League work over the weekend, just because there was a player.
Is he in the UK?
No. He is an international
is he third tier
manager.
In America?
He is an international manager for the great nation of Montserrat.
The French territory?
Yeah. Caribbean island.
Is that its own nation, Montserrat? Apologies there if I've just scrolled back history and erased their independence. Yeah. I'm honestly not sure if Montserrat's its own nation. It must be.
Ashley Westwood, at the time of this article coming out, the former Burnley stalwart, manager of the great nation of Afghanistan.
That is unusual.
You remember Timuri Kitsbaya?
Very well, yeah. The ball fella.
Yep.
He was
ex-Newcastle. He was
kicked
managing
the advertising hoarding, Ollie.
He was managing Cyprus at one point. Just like
okay.
Yeah, not
Do you
the
remember him
worst.
smashing the advertising hoarding?
No. Oh yeah, putting his foot through it or whatever in frustration.
I think he scored and he just absolutely tore into it. Anyway, keep going because I'm enjoying this very much.
Andy Morrison, who I didn't even remember as a former Manchester City fan. Sri Lanka. Stern John, once the manager of St. Lucia, the great nation. And the man who I think landed on his feet with all of these, Emerson Boyce, if you remember the name. Wigan legend.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Took interim charge of the great nation of Barbados, which is like, yeah, if you're going to be interim, that's just called a holiday, isn't it? That's a 4-month holiday in Barbados. Might be 2 weeks with an international break if it's just one international break while they search for a permanent one. But yeah.
So what's in it for these nations? Like, what's apart from saying you have a former professional footballer managing you? I mean, what's in it? Like, let's take Cyprus, Ollie. Like, is there not a Cypriot there who has, coached under 9s, under 11s, under 12s, knows the league, knows the system, understands the footballing culture and the history? I mean, what benefit? Tamuri Ketspire? Something like that, I think.
Yeah, Tamuri Ketspire.
Whatever his first name was. Okay, that's, oh, man, you've blown my two out of the water there. But yeah, very...
So I get it. If you're signing a Lee Bowyer to be your international manager, it draws more attention from your nation's sports federation as a whole, right? So perhaps that leads to more investment, more money, more eyeballs, obviously generates more revenue. Because Lee Bowyer was a pretty prominent name. Guy played in the Champions League. Same, Tamuri Kitsbaya played at a very high level. But when you're looking at people like Boyce or Andy Morrison, like that's a tough sell for a nation. Or even like Ashley Westwood, who didn't achieve levels of fame and quality like a Lee Bowyer did. Why do you take the role in Afghanistan? I mean, it's just that is when it becomes a bit kind of, I don't understand it. I understand a big name, eyeballs, attention, money. But otherwise, like, is Ashley Westwood not happy just doing maybe some League 2, National League coaching, something like that? I mean, there's some pretty bad sides in the National League that need new managers. I think Kevin Phillips might be out at AFC Filed soon. Like, you don't need to go to Afghanistan to get a job. Very odd.
Very, very. It's literally like you being sent to, like, Georgia to broadcast in Georgian or something, or to lead their broadcast product of, like, the main sports channel in Georgia, just because, you work for some big companies in the UK, and you go out there and we've got this Ollie Wilson guy in. I mean, he worked for BT and Sky, etc., and everyone be like, oh, great, does he speak Georgian? No. Does he know anything about Georgia? No. How long's he going to be here? No idea. Like, but he's just there. I mean, yeah, very unusual.
I love the idea of Emerson Boyce being offered that job. Do I want the interim, no-pressure Barbados job?
And what's his agent said to him as well? Like, I tell you what, it's like that DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street. Something just came across my desk. It's possibly the best thing I've seen in years. I was waiting for Wilson's DiCaprio impression, but
no, I can't do the great man himself. Maybe a McConaughey after a couple of beverages, but even that, I'm going to be out of vision for a second, mate. I'm just going to fill up my coffee, but I can hear you if you want to line.
No worries. I'm going to intro the Australian Open, Ollie. So Mr. Oliver Wilson has chosen this moment to go and get his cup of coffee. Those watching on YouTube will enjoy Wilson's backdrop, which we are being told will be momentarily or very soon. He's going to create a nice new backdrop in an office in his back garden. Anyway, Australian Open. So, Novak Djokovic. Now, Novak Djokovic, the greatest male tennis player of all time, 24 slams. He won at the Australian Open yesterday. And at the Australian Open, Ollie, Channel 9, the official broadcaster, interview all the players on court, right? after the match, and they interviewed the winner of the match. And Novak Djokovic refused to take part in the on-court interview, and he boycotted it. And then in his press conference later, he said that he boycotted it because of the insulting and offensive comments from a Channel 9 broadcaster whose name is Tony Jones, because Tony Jones had called Novak Djokovic a has-been and said it was over and he's yesterday news. Not exactly those words, but essentially called him a has-been. But Tony Jones, as I understand it, and I'm not necessarily au fait with Australian broadcasters, so I might be a little bit off here, but that's kind of his vibe. He's a bit more like mocky and jokey, and he was trying to sort of take the piss out of Novak and elicit a bit of a response. Is it rude? Yeah, it was, but I think the biggest takeaway for me here, by the way, Channel 9 and Tony Jones have later apologised and everyone's kissed and made up. But the bigger point for me here, Ollie, is do some sports stars just need to create needle to really fire them up? I mean, Djokovic has done everything in the sport. Like, he's literally done everything in the sport. And he just wants one more slam to go ahead of Margaret Court, who's the women's player who also has 24 slams. So he wants that 25th slam. And do you think that maybe motivation's faded a bit for Novak Djokovic? And so he's done a couple of mad things recently. Like, we talked about him getting Andy Murray as part of his coaching staff, which is a pretty unusual thing to do. But there he is. Like, Andy Murray's in his box, and then he's come out and picked a fight with a random Channel 5 broadcaster. I mean, why? Like, you're Novak Djokovic. You hear someone's called you a has-been. Like, isn't that just water off a duck's back? Like, okay, mate, I've won 24 slams. Like, I'm Novak Djokovic. Like, call me anything you want. It doesn't matter because it's not true. Like, I'm still in the Australian Open, won the Olympic gold medal last year. I'm like literally the GOAT. Like, you can say anything, and like, how can that possibly penetrate Novak Djokovic? So do you think he's kind of picking fights that aren't there to create that siege mentality to eke out that last couple of percent that he feels will help him go on and win the Australian Open?
I wouldn't surprise me if that's 100% what he's doing, because that's what great athletes have done and will do. I mean, we've all read and heard about the Michael Jordan stuff where he would make things up that maybe weren't even true in his own head to give himself that edge. And woe betide anybody that, like, early in a game went, got that covered. And Jordan's like, right, I'm going at you all game long because he needs that chip. But that's what the great athletes have. The borderline, if they weren't great athletes in their respective sports, they would be doing 25 to life because they're psychopaths. They're driven mentally on a way that so many of us probably can't even think about getting into that headspace, because that's what you have to do to be great. I think you could probably argue the same about Cristiano Ronaldo. You can look at Tom Brady in the NFL. Getting that chip on his shoulder was the worst thing you could do, because it just motivates to come back harder and harder and show that you're the best in the business. So it would surprise me if Novak needed that to find that extra boost to get a 25th slam. But what it wouldn't surprise me is if he'd already been doing this throughout his career anyway, and we didn't necessarily know completely about it. And the fact that obviously the greats that he's been competing with over the last few years have been dropping off the map, Murray, Nadal, Federer, and maybe there isn't that long-lasting legacy of sparring with each other on big competitions. So this is the new way to find that winning mentality that Novak needs. I think it's, after what I said about Ange Postecoglou, it'd be very bad of me to start saying that I think Tony Jones's comments were acceptable and everything like that, because if that's...
Oh, no, we love a hypocrite on Not on the Sports Pod, Ollie. I'm sure I contradict myself 7 times a pod, right?
I mean, I think Novak Djokovic would never normally bring a stumble on a name to the attention, but it sounds like a fantastic Temu version of Novak Djokovic. Jovac knockoff itch is an excellent one.
I like Novak's Djokovic.
Novak's, yeah,
the vaccine. Novak's Djokovic is the best.
Superb. And, going back to the original point, yeah, I do think he probably is using this as his way to keep the grind going, because Grand Slam tennis tournaments as well, they're a grueling process for players. It's long hours, it's late hours sometimes, it's high intensity in every single match. There's an incredible amount of pressure on the big guns to at least get to semi-finals before they're even taking on some of the people that are genuinely equal to them in terms of tennis playing ability. So, yeah, use what you need. And I'm all about hearing these kind of chippy moments, because I don't want Novak Djokovic smiling at the camera and being all friendly. And, the Aussie Open got in trouble for, asking female tennis players, give us a spin and all that kind of stuff to show off their outfit. Like, I don't want that. I want somebody coming out and being like, this is sport. I want to bury who's in front of me, and I want to do it with a foot on the throat kind of thing. Like, I love that in sport. I absolutely love it.
The Aussie Open crowd, Ollie, got a bit of a rep. The Aussie Open was played in January in the Melbourne summer. It's known as like the booziest slam going. And you get a mixed reaction from players here. I think some embrace it and love it. Some absolutely hate it because they're more purist and they think that there should be dead silence, kind of like a snooker crowd. But I thought that there was an interesting moment this week when Danielle Collins, the American sports star, she was getting kind of booed and heckled by a very, very boisterous, I would say, even for the Australian Open crowd. And then afterwards she said, I just want to thank the haters. They pay my wages. And she did it with a smile on her face, and it was really American what she said. She said, every person that's bought a ticket to come out here and heckle me or do whatever they do, it's all going towards the Danielle Collins fund. I'm going on a 5-star hotel with my girlfriends, and I'll think of you guys when I'm there sipping my, cocktail. And I was like, that's really crass and really, really American. But I sort of enjoyed it. Like, if you're going to dish it out in the crowd, then, a tennis player being like, look, you're putting the gold bracelet on my wrist is was quite cute and quite fun.
You need bad guys. And I think the difference is that in sport, you need bad guys, but who keep the decorum of the athletes on court. The difference being that sometimes in golf, like I got frustrated with Tyrrell Hatton this week because he starts smashing his clubs around and breaking pieces of the golf course when he gets angry. And that's not good decorum for an athlete, particularly in golf. It's pretty shoddy looking, and he's been reprimanded and chastised for it a lot. But he's a very good player, so it does give him that bad guy attitude a bit. So I like having a bad guy or a bad woman to kind of root for almost, but I just like the fact as well that at least in tennis, it's the athletes keeping the decorum. I don't like this increase in the boozy crowd, especially...
Oh, you surprised me there, Mr. Wilson.
I don't know. I love a good atmosphere, but I don't think it needs to be fueled by alcohol.
Because you like atmosphere and you like a drink and you love sport, so why not put those three things together, my friend?
I had this. It sounds stupid, but like revelation many, many years ago. I went to a basketball game in Los Angeles, and I was working out there, and I didn't take my passport with me, and they wouldn't accept a driver's license, so I couldn't get a drink. And I was just sat there. I was like, oh yeah, this is sport. I'm watching players that I really enjoy watching. Like, I don't need to have a drink to enjoy the sport, because you actually take in less of it, because you're more thinking about, shall I go and get another beer? Am I a bit boozed up? Should I go to the bathroom? All that kind of thing. I like a good atmosphere, but it's passion driven as opposed to booze driven. An obnoxious drunk yelling aimlessly, Chelsea, 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 boring. Liverpool fans actually generating kind of weird 80s songs and turn them into a ode to Luis Suarez, adore, love. There's some intelligence behind that, almost a bit of thought process, and that's what a good atmosphere is to me. And also, the sports rely on their different atmospheres. I don't want to go to every single sporting event and there's just somebody like, go on, Andy Murray, or whatever. Like, that's just irritating. Tennis, again, it's one of those sports where you should have a level of decorum about yourself being there. Coo when there's a great shot. Ooh and ah when there's nervy moments in a rally. But let's not bring it down to such a crass level that we go to what's happened in the PGA with the event in Arizona that they do in February, where it's just a booze fest and people sliding around in the mud. And that's the slippy slope, because you give people an inch, they take a mile. You give them a drink, they'll take 7. So...
But what is it? But some sports, obviously, it's fine to do that. I mean, the darts, football, there's loads of sports where it's accepted, embraced as part of the culture. And there's a lot of sports where it's not. Snooker, tennis, golf, etc., etc. And that's part of how sports have been historically watched. But why does that have to be a static thing, Ollie? Why can't a sport like tennis think, okay, viewing habits are changing, things are changing, young generations are changing in how they consume content, news, and why can't we change from being a sport where everyone has to be quiet during the points to a sport where we say, look, in this Grand Slam, we don't mind the spectators entering and exiting the court to get another beer. We don't mind them chanting during the point. Like, the slam that does that will piss off a lot of the players, but possibly get more eyeballs on the sport. Like, why does it have to be static? Why can't it change?
Because it's based around what the athletes need in the event, so to speak. A snooker player needs that level of quiet and concentration. A darts player has been playing darts in a boozy pub for the first 10 years of his life anyway. So, I mean, or a number of them
or
have
in a boozy
anyway.
crash.
Yeah. They've got the bottle with a Guinness in it or something like that as a young lad. I mean, it just... That is the way the sport is. Football is played in front of a raucous 70,000 seater capacity crowd and doesn't necessarily require that same level of concentration to be switched on, like maybe a tennis player needs to ensure they get the timing right, they get the serve right, to avoid those sorts of distractions that take place out there on the court. And I think similarly with golf, some people get very just put off when they're stood over something trying to be very precise. And if there's just that flicker in the corner, it can put you off and agitate you. So it's the requirements for the athletes to be able to succeed at their best level. In the same way, footballers probably need an atmosphere. That raises the game. You know, that's the great thing about an FA Cup final when the underdog is fighting to stay in it or hold on to it. And the crowd, you suddenly get that roar on 88 minutes of, we're only 2 minutes away, come on, let's go. And it elevates players' levels. And a crowd can do that in tennis if it's done at the right time and the right moment. And because tennis players in particular, they have that stoic kind of stern look on their face from the moment the ball goes up for the serve. And then after a point, emotion can release and then they have to come back down again and come back down again. And the crowd should have that ebb and flow of that emotion. That's what would make it great. And that's what makes it great to be in an atmosphere at a good tennis tournament.
Let's talk about the sport then. So LIV have got a TV deal. Talk us through what it is and why it's significant, Ollie.
Well, the LIV TV deal, this is going back to golf. And actually, just tracking back slightly, if you want to have tournaments that are boozy in tennis and you want to try that, let's try it in the same way golf has tried it with a spin-off version. Let's not do it at a Grand Slam at the biggest moment of somebody's career, potentially. Let's do it in a low-level 500, 250 ATP, WTA tour or something like that. Because LIV have done that. They've gone down the let's get the music pumping, the party atmosphere, throwing beers onto the green, all this kind of crazy stuff. And they've finally got a TV deal with Fox Sports, which all the details haven't really come out yet. It was announced over the weekend. But the very interesting thing was we spoke last week a bit and finished once the cleaning lady had come, I think, for you last week, about TGL. And this simulator golf league that's been set up by Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, and in conjunction with the PGA. And after that first week of TGL, the stories that came out were, 900,000 people tuned in to that coverage, let alone who else recorded it, watched it at a later date, caught the highlights, etc. That was a really strong viewing number for a brand new rogue idea in the sport. And everybody has seen that and thought, oh, that's more than LIV get. So TGL in viewership is more than LIV. But LIV is dealing with streaming on YouTube up until a few days ago. They didn't have this TV deal. Now we're going to have a direct comparison, broadcast rights-wise and viewership-wise, on US TV of, is it LIV or is it TGL? And is the success of TGL on ESPN actually forced Fox Sports to go, we like a bit of that. Let's get this deal finalised and let's get the new season of LIV Golf on Fox Sports. Because Fox don't have to do anything. LIV are still doing their own production on all of it. It's Arlo White and the crew that have been doing it for the last few years anyway, still doing that broadcast. Fox are literally just going, here's a slot. And some of the big events on LIV will go on Fox's main channels, Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports. And then there will be others that are put on some of their subsidiary channels in the same way NBC put stuff on Peacock. But it is now a direct comparison for that new breakout away from the norm tradition of golf that we want to see of, is it LIV or TGL, that's kind of paving the right path with golf fans in terms of potential viewership. And will this also legitimise what LIV is doing by giving them a TV rights deal? Because if you're a streaming service, it's like, well, NASP is just on YouTube, so you're as good as NASP. We are on the same level as LIV because we broadcast our stuff in the exact same place. LIV has now
undiscovered, Ollie, but yeah, I concur with that statement.
LIV has now overtaken us because they've got a TV deal, and I'm just waiting for a similar offer now to come in from another broadcaster.
Coming,
yeah,
it's coming. What about LIV and PGA? Like, when's this merger happening? Is it happening in 2025 or beyond?
I mean, who knows? Everything gets hot and cold very quickly. Obviously, the PIF has been, the Saudi PIF has been invested into the PGA now that we discussed a few weeks ago. But when this deal will actually get finalised and done and how it will look is very kind of much up in the air still, particularly now with a TV deal, because Fox Sports is going to be competing with the PGA and on NBC for golf viewers at the end of the day. So they're now direct rivals once again on US TV platforms. There's also some other elements taking place of, Hatton wins the first Rolex event on the European Tour this weekend, which is obviously great for LIV. The discussion has come out about world ranking points because we're in a Ryder Cup year. Ranking points are massively important because the top 6 players in America and the top 6 players on the European Tour in terms of ranking points will then get a chance to play in the Ryder Cup, plus then the 6 captain picks from each respective captain. John Rahm's come out this year at the start of the year and said LIV Golf should be given ranking points the same as the PGA. It allows us to get into majors as well, which is the other thing if you've got a high enough world ranking. LIV doesn't get any ranking points at all. And the big stars that have gone across, I think, are getting frustrated and quite annoyed by that, particularly as someone like John Rahm collapsed this week on his return to the European Tour in Dubai. And I don't necessarily agree with that. LIV golfers play 3 days. PGA Tour events are 4 days. If you want the world rankings of a PGA Tour, play a full game. Play a full 4 days of golf over a weekend. Otherwise, you should get 3/4 of the ranking points for winning a LIV event. If you are going to have world ranking points, then you do. Because holding on for 4 days is much more tough than holding on for 3 days at the top level of golf. So, yeah, it's all still a bit of a clusterfuck, almost. But moves are still being made that might either pull the two parties apart again or bring them closer together.
Before we talk about NFL, Ollie, let's just touch on the snooker, because we had a request this week from one of the loyal listeners to talk about the snooker. Please feel free to send in your request to cover any sport you want. Shawn Murphy won a second Masters title with a 10-7 win at Alexandra Palace. He's 42 years of age. Obviously, he was certainly not one of the favourites when he came into the event. Did you watch any of it, Ollie? Do you care? What's the future of snooker? Does it exist? I mean, how does it work? If someone's not making a 147, how do you attract interest outside?
Well, we were talking about, obviously, the request came in to talk about the snooker, and I realised, like, the Masters was this week, but I always thought from being young and watching the snooker that the Masters was at the Crucible in Sheffield. That was the peak, but that's the World Championship rather than the Masters. Mm-hmm. So my brain, because it hasn't dipped into snooker enough, it's still kind of like balancing which one's more important, the Masters or the World Championship. Are they the same but different? And then I got thinking about snooker in general and how it has been a kind of a collapse for a sport that was up there with darts in terms of popularity. Back when we were youngsters, I think, 12 years old, you could come back and you could find your dad or mum or whoever easily sat at home catching the last few frames of a snooker final.
My grandma loved it, mate, up in Leeds. Like, loved the snooker, couldn't wait to talk snooker with me. Odd, yeah.
But it hasn't progressed, and I think it's because snooker was a stalwart on the BBC for that time of year. And because we weren't littered with so many TV channels and there weren't Sky Sports channels dedicated to individual sports, for instance, and Sky wasn't as prominent and everything like that, sport on the BBC meant a lot. That's why you had FA Cup passion was higher, because it was rare to get that sport on terrestrial TV. And same with the snooker. So snooker's lost out on the fact that we have so much more access and ability to watch the sports that we like, rather than it being a case of, if you only had 5 events on the BBC a year of all the sports, the Open, the FA Cup final, the Snooker World Championship, the darts final, and maybe the last day of the Premier League season or something, that is essential viewing for somebody that doesn't have Sky. So you're going to watch it all if you're just a sports fan that enjoys getting into anything like you do in the Olympics. Everybody becomes an armchair pundit on a sport they've never watched in their life during a winter or summer games. And I think snooker's missed out now on that. And those characters have gone. I used to be able to name Jimmy White, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Stephen Hendry, Ken Doherty, Peter Ebdon. And now there aren't many snooker players that are kind of those household names, aside from Rocket Ronnie.
But let me pick you up, Ollie, on something you said, though. You said that darts suits the boisterous crowd because organically it comes from a boisterous backdrop, a busy pub, right? And that made sense in my head, whereas tennis, it's not normal for people to come up through the tennis ranks and hear noise in the grounds around the courts. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. But for darts, it does make sense. And I was kind of nodding along to that, and I thought, yeah, that's a good point, Ollie. But how does that work with snooker? Because snooker is also a pub game. And if you're playing, anyone knows this, Ollie, around certainly the countries with the snooker tables and pubs, and Great Britain is one of those places. If you're playing snooker, there's noise the whole time. There's someone, you're in a busy pub. Oh, excuse me, you got to nudge someone out the way to take a shot. It's busy, it's raucous, it's loud. So why doesn't that transfer to the professional game?
Pool is a pub sport. Snooker is played in snooker halls because a snooker table is so much bigger.
Oh, I've been done there.
It's so much bigger than a pool table.
He's right. He's only gone and done it.
And the pool atmospheres are actually a bit more boisterous. Things like the Mosconi Cup and stuff. It's not yelling throughout all the shots, but there is a bit more of that boisterous kind of atmosphere. Whereas snooker, you need that giant room, which is why it's snooker halls. And snooker halls in general aren't the most boozy, rowdy places. You can go down the pool bar, Riley's pool bar, for instance, and get a few beers in and stuff like that, but it's not like being in the heart of a pub with smoke and ash everywhere and just throwing arrows at the wall for 2 hours or something like that. So yeah, that's why it doesn't work with snooker. Plus, we've been discussing throughout this season, Dave, the difficulty between a 9-dart finish, a 147 break, and obviously the hole-in-one, and the level of concentration required. I mean, snooker players are like mathematicians. They're 3 shots further down the line than you even think they are lining things up, let alone the shot that they're taking at that point. So there's so much concentration required. You cannot have that boozy atmosphere. And there's also something quite majestic about a quiet crucible and just hearing the kiss of a snooker ball off another one, and then that little rattle as it just plops into the pocket and trundles down.
I agree. It's gorgeous. But I'm just thinking if these sports want to stay relevant, does the TikTok gen, do they appreciate that, Ollie? Are they like, no, where's all my visuals and my flashing lights and my 3 seconds of dopamine hit that I've never,
But this is the thing of snooker is one of those sports that you either got sucked into as a youngster for a night or two, or it's one of those ones as well that I think you just mature towards because you realise that life doesn't have to be at a dopamine intense pace. Don't get me wrong, it's great when things happen like that and when you get fast play around the snooker table, and that's why they had things like Big Break, which was basically like the LIV Golf of snooker, wasn't it? Big Break, because it was let's do some wild crazy things with snooker and try and liven it up. But the actual core essence of the sport is all about slow, thought out, majestic smoothness. That's why they still have to wear shirt and waistcoat around the table. It actually
nice.
It's classy, isn't it?
Stuff like that exists. It's like when people are so desperate these days, Ollie, to tear down tradition. And obviously we're wandering into grumpy old man territory here, but people are they want to tear down everything that stood for anything at any point. It's yeah, okay, we can do that. And should snooker players be forced to wear this outfit, or should you have to wear all white at Wimbledon? Sure, we can get rid of those traditions if you want, but if you tear down every tradition, everything that stood for decades, you don't have the anchor to the past. And I do think some traditions it's absolutely worth preserving.
It's also
so I've kind of counted myself there, but
it's all the same. If you tear down all the traditions and the little quirks, everything becomes the same.
You're just left with TikTok and Starbucks and all the all the crap.
Do you want to go to a snooker hall and have it feel like you're in a stadium, and then you've got the same way you act, so nothing changes, nothing's different? I mean, the ref in snooker looks like a butler. He could be bringing you your cue on a silver platter.
So good.
It's awesome. It's like he's in Top and Tails. He wouldn't look out of place wandering through the halls of Buckingham Palace, And it's stuff like that is the eloquence of a sport. And
that's why don't people look at that now, Ollie, and they're like, the patriarchy or whatever. People don't like stuff like that anymore, do they?
And they don't, and people don't like stuffiness and because it's easy. Stuffiness is difficult. Making yourself dress to look sensible and smart is difficult.
Bloody hell, some pearls from Wilson today, I tell you.
Well, it is though. But there's nothing wrong with holding yourself and your sport to a higher standard. I mean, isn't that the nice thing? you have to wear a collared shirt on a golf course, no jeans, golf shoes that most of them look smart. Again, those barriers are being broken down. You've got Nike Air Maxes being worn with golf studs on the underside and things like that. You can wear Jordan high-top golf shoes now, which it looks cool, but doesn't look classy. It can sometimes look smart, like the same way a guy wearing a pair of Converse at a wedding can look smart, but it's not quite what it was.
Can it, though? Like, you're not edgy? Like, put on some smart shoes, you lazy bum?
Well, exactly. Stop being lazy and take 10 extra
wedding
minutes.
day, bro. People that do that, like, I'm going to wear Vans with my suit. Are you, though? Like, why? Like, put on some fucking shoes. Your grandma's here.
But that's it. It takes 10, 15 extra minutes to just iron a shirt, look presentable more than you normally do walking out of the house, and show that this is a high level of expectation. I'd wear a shirt and jacket to do a Super Bowl broadcast. Not because I had to. I could have done it in T-shirt and shorts. But I wore a shirt and jacket because the level of event raised the stakes and raised the bar. And when you present yourself in a proper light, and this is turning less into a sports podcast and more into a how to be in society grumpy mode. But the level is there. That's why as well, like, you know, there are a lot of football commentators that aren't on camera. But I guarantee you, every single person on Match of the Day and on a Premier League World Feed broadcast, they are wearing a suit because it is what's expected and it raises you. And yeah, and I think that then comes through in the sincerity that you treat it in the same way that...
Like, Ollie, Milan, you've been to Milan a few times, one of your like more favoured cities. And when I was there, because in Milan, people, they don't just walk around the city in trackies, I can tell you that. So you can't just... And it rubs off on you. When I left the house in Milan, obviously if you do it in the UK, like, people don't give a shit, like they wear their pajamas to church or whatever, they don't care. But in Milan, it's like there's a certain like level of etiquette and decorum that you need to hit, and you do get sucked into that. Ollie, we don't really plan ahead too much on Not Another Sports Pod, but one thing, and by that I mean the night before, there's like one WhatsApp message being like, what should we chat about? What time do you want to do it? But I will say that in my diary in 3 weeks' time, is it 3 weeks? Ollie Wilson, which probably told me this 2 months ago, he can't record first thing in the morning on Monday the 10th of February. Is that right, Ollie? Because the Super Bowl's the night before.
Yeah.
So that leads us into the final section of the pod, the NFL. Tell us, just with 3 weeks to go before the Super Bowl, tell us why people should start dipping into NFL now to get some kind of grounding in the sport ahead of watching the Super Bowl on the 9th of February.
So there's always stories running through every single sports team, right? But the stories running through these sports teams are phenomenal going into the last 2 games of the season before the Super Bowl. We're at the semi-final stage, if you want to call it that, conference against conference, AFC championship game, NFC championship game coming up. So on the AFC championship game side, you've got Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been a shadow of their former selves in terms of offensively. They've normally been a powerhouse. Patrick Mahomes is considered the best quarterback in the league. Andy Reid, their head coach, considered one of the best head coaches in the league. Offensively, it hasn't quite clicked this year, but their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, has been a monster at having a hard-hitting, hard-nosed defense that can shut down the aerial attack and shut down the run game. And they're going for a three-peat. Never been done in NFL history. Never been done by Brady and Belichick and the New England Patriots. And in their glory years...
Say that again, Ollie, the three-peat.
Three-peat. 3 Super Bowls in a row. They've won the last 2, looking to win 3 in a row. They beat the Niners and they beat the Eagles, obviously, 2 years ago. So this is unprecedented territory. In their way, the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills in the 80s lost 4 straight Super Bowls and have never won a Super Bowl and never been back to a Super Bowl since. So we are talking like that downtrodden franchise in upper state New York. The whole city is about this NFL team when it comes to sports. Like, they've got an ice hockey team, but it's the Bills is the long-standing thing. They've got a young guy, Josh Allen, who is the savior of football in Buffalo, basically, at quarterback. He can run, he can throw, and he is the epitome of kind of Buffalo football in that he went to like a smaller school, Wyoming, in college, but he's got a cannon of an arm and can sling it as good as anybody else and just plays happen, puts the team on his back. They lost their star receiver last year. Hasn't affected the Bills at all. They're still grinding things out. And it's that we play in the snow, we play in the oldest stadium in the NFL, or second oldest stadium in the NFL, and we do ugly, hard, away from New York glitz and glamour kind of football to get victories. And these two have gone head-to-head in the playoffs numerous occasions over the last few years. And literally every single game that they've had has been a barnstormer that's either gone to overtime or been won in the final seconds of the game. So that'll be arguably the best game of the week. On the other side next week, the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Washington Commanders. The Eagles, who took one of the best running backs in the league from one of their biggest rivals, the New York Giants. And Saquon Barkley has had over 2,000 rushing yards throughout the regular season and now the postseason. He has been unbelievably good coming into Philadelphia. Everybody hates Philly. Fans, the team. There's just this like chip. For some reason, it's a bit like Man United, I think. Everybody hates United. Everybody hates Philadelphia. And the Eagles are obviously trying to go back to the Super Bowl that they lost 2 years ago to the Chiefs. And they're taking on the Washington Commanders, which is the Cinderella story. A rookie quarterback. They had a running back that I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago was shot in preseason and then came back and has been a really good running back for Washington. So he's
American
shot back on the field, now playing in an NFC Championship game and a chance to go to a Super Bowl. They've got a really good offense, and it's whether this kind of young kid at quarterback can be the guy to take them to a Super Bowl in his first year, which is an unbelievable achievement when you're playing at that position in that sport. And the Eagles and Washington are divisional rivals. They play each other twice a year. They're in the same division. So it's a long-standing hatred between these two. So that's going to be like the ugly, feisty one taking place next week. That's at 8 o'clock, and the other game is around about 12 o'clock at night. And yeah, I mean, whatever happens, we're going to have a great story because Washington will be in their first Super Bowl for decades. They haven't been to a championship game in over 30 years. The Eagles will be going back there once again, trying to get revenge on the Chiefs, or it will be the narrative of the Bills are finally back in the Super Bowl and can they finally get over the hurdle. So it's all worth watching.
What time is it on UK time on the 9th?
So
it's always late, but it varies, doesn't it?
The Super Bowl will be about an 11:30 kickoff, something like that in the evening. So that's a late night. And obviously you have an extended halftime show of about half an hour. But the games next week, the first one's at 8 o'clock in the evening, and then there'll be around about 3.5 hours, and then the second game will be kicking off at about 11:30. So
I feel like this is the first Super Bowl you haven't attended for years, though, Ollie.
I didn't go to the last one either. Yeah,
you didn't go to the last one either, but you went 2019, 2020. Right?
Yeah, I did 4 in 5 with COVID being the one I missed out in between as well. So I did the and I went to one a few years before that too as a reporter. So yeah, and if the Eagles go there, I'm already chatting to companies about trying to work out some accreditation and a free air miles flight to Philadelphia for next week because I would...
Don't rule them out. Rule them out.
Look, I've got an early kickoff on Saturday. I can be on a 6 o'clock flight out of London Saturday night. I can do the game on Sunday and then fly back Monday morning to get back in time to do a Tuesday, Wednesday Sky Sports hit. If that comes off, that's a great weekend. That's a great weekend, I tell you.
Still got 3 weeks to sort it, so nice.
Will you dip your toe into the NFL pool?
Ollie, it's always the same. Like, I watch the first half hour of the Super Bowl, and then just when I'm starting to understand it, and I think, Mark Chapman's pretty good at talking me through all this, actually. Like, just when I'm getting to that point, I get pretty snoozy. But I remember was it like 2019 or 2020? It was like the greatest ever. Wasn't it one of the best ever comebacks? Or there's 1 year where I'd watched like the first half, and then I woke up in the morning and the headline BBC Sport was like, greatest Super Bowl end ever. And I was like, oh shit, should probably stick it out next time.
We've been very lucky over the years. There have been 5 or 6 probably the best ever Super Bowls in the last 10 years, quite comfortably. You just got to get grinding through. Just whet your appetite. Our mutual friend Adrian Mitchell and I will be messaging and have done on the championship weekend, because the championship weekend's always better than the Super Bowl as well, because you get 2 games, the teams that know each other, there's an edge, there's a rivalry. Yeah, championship weekend this weekend. Watch the first game, 8 o'clock.